Hello, I do want to welcome you back to Bible Studies with Russ. We're picking up today in Judges chapter 20 and verse 36. We're going to be picking up. We're going to do a little bit of recap just real quick. I know it's been, as I was looking, it's been several weeks since we left off. But we're going to finish chapter 20. We're going to really just summarize it. Then we're going to discuss chapter 21 of Judges. And a lot of this is just going to be a summary of some things that's going on. And then next week, we're going to begin, as I mentioned in our Facebook post, we'll begin a series of lessons based on strengthening, on the theme of strengthening your heart. And if you're not on in the Facebook group, you can go to Facebook, of course, and look up Bible Studies with Russ, the group, and we can add you to that. You can request to be added, I should say. We're trying to do our very best to keep any spammers and fake accounts and all that kind of stuff out of there. But anyway, so in Judges chapter 20, just way of recap, and if you look at Judges 19, 20, and 21, we have one commentator summarized as anarchy and shame. He says, here we have a story of savage justice for an unspeakable, horrible crime. The tribes of Benjamin was almost wiped out. And as we see here, there's a lot of death at the end of chapter 20, especially. The last chapters of Judges give us a picture of anarchy and confusion. Israel had no judge and no king. And when the people lost the way to God, they sank into sin and shame. When they're not following God, anyone's not following God, it's going to happen, right? You're going to sink into sin. You're going to sink, no doubt, into shame. There should be shame there when we're not following God. The book of Judges is not a beautiful story. God had founded a nation. He was determined to maintain that nation. But this book tells some of the evil things which the people did and the punishment which came upon them. We also have some heroes of faith that are also mentioned. We have, for example, Barak, Gideon, Japheth, and Samson are included among the heroes here, as they're also mentioned in Hebrews 11:32. Now, of course, these people did many things which were wrong, but they had faith in God, and God used them to accomplish His purposes. Now, we're going to just summarize chapter 20, as we've already we've already studied, I should say, all the way up through verse 35. In verse 36 and following through the end of the chapter, which ends here in verse 48, can be summarized here in verse 46 in all reality. So all the men who fell of Benjamin that day were 25,000 men who drew the sword. All these were men of valor. But 600 men turned and fled toward the wilderness in the rock of Rimnon, and they stayed at the rock of Rimnon for 4 months. And the men of Israel turned back against the children of Benjamin and struck them down with the edge of the sword from every city, men and beasts, all who were found. They also set fire to all the cities they came to. Destruction. Why? Because people were not seeking after God. As we find here, the tribe of Benjamin was destroyed. If you read verse 36 through the end of this chapter, you find it's all about the smoke going up, the destruction, and the people being attacked because of their wickedness. Now, as you get into chapter 21, you have, as we have here, as this translation has here, this heading, wives provided for the Benjamites. But the one I have here in chapter 21 is the desolation of Benjamin. Again, we're going to just look at a few verses here in chapter 21 to summarize and not necessarily read all 25 verses here. Look at verse 1. It says, now the men of Israel had sworn an oath at Mizpah, saying, none of us shall give his daughter to Benjamin as wife. The men of Israel had sworn that none of their daughters should marry Benjamin. When the struggle was over and the Israelites had time for reflection, they regretted what they had done. One of the tribes was near extinction, and the people wondered how this tribe could be restored. We continue reading there, going down to verse 3. Then the people came to the house of God and remained there before God till evening. They lifted up their voices and wept bitterly and said, O Lord God of Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that today there should be one tribe missing in Israel? Why has this come to pass is the idea when we look at there in verse 3. They knew what had come to pass, but they had carried their punishment too far and attempted to destroy both man and beasts. We continue reading there, verses 4 through 7. So it was on the next morning that the people rose early and built an altar there, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And the children of Israel said, Who is there among all the tribes of Israel who did not come up with the assembly to the Lord? For they had made a great oath concerning anyone who had not come up to the Lord at Mizpah, saying, He shall be put to death. And the children of Israel grieved for Benjamin, their brother, and said, One tribe was cut off from Israel today. What shall we do for wives for those who remain, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we will not give them our daughters as wives? As you look there at verse 7, it appears that in their fury they had destroyed all the women and children. Men who carry out excesses against others usually live to regret their action. As we find here, as we mentioned already back in verse 3, it would seem that destruction almost went too far, right? Not that God caused it to go too far, but soldiers got carried away, right? We continue reading there, verses 8 through 13. And they said, it says there, verse 8, and they said, What one is there from the tribes of Israel who did not come up to Mizpah to the Lord? And in fact, no one had come to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. For when the people were counted, indeed, not one of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead was there. So the congregation sent out their 12,000 of their most valiant men and commanded them, saying, Go and strike the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead with the edge of the sword, including the women and children. And this is the thing that you shall do. You shall utterly destroy every male and every woman who has known a man intimately. So they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead 400 young virgins who had not known a man intimately. They brought them to the camp at Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan. Then the whole congregation sent word to the children of Benjamin who were at the rock of Rimmon and announced peace to them. As you look at verse 13, we find to assure that the war was over and that they might now safely leave their homes. They do what? They make a call for peace there. You read verses 14 going down through verse 19. So Benjamin came back at that time, and they gave them the women whom they had saved alive to the women of Jabesh Gilead, and yet they had not found enough for them. And the people grieved for Benjamin, because the Lord had made a void in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, What shall we do for wives for those who remain, since the women of Benjamin have been destroyed? And they said, There must be an inheritance for the survivors of Benjamin, that a tribe may not be destroyed from Israel. However, we cannot give them wives from our daughters, for the children of Israel have sworn an oath, saying, Cursed be the one who gives a wife to Benjamin. Then they said, In fact, there is a yearly feast of the Lord in Shiloh, which is north of Bethel, on the east side of the highway that goes up from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Lebanon. So there's a feast of the Lord that's mentioned in verse 19, one of the great feasts which brought thousands of people together. And we find here they're trying to solve this problem of everyone having wives, right? Verses 20 through 25, verses 20 through 23 rather first. Therefore they instructed the children of Benjamin, saying, Go lie and wait in the vineyards and watch. And just when the daughters of Shiloh come out to perform their dances, then come out from the vineyards, every man catch a wife for himself. And for the daughters of Shiloh, then go to the land of Benjamin. Wow. Wait for them to come out and dance and go grab you a wife. Pretty crazy. Verse 22, Then it shall be when their fathers or their brothers come to us to complain, that we will say to them, Be kind to them for our sakes, because we did not take a wife for any of them in the war. For it is not as though you have given the women to them at this time, making yourselves guilty of your oath. Verse 22. Look at verse 23. And the children of Benjamin did so. They took enough wives for their number from those who danced, whom they caught. Then they went and returned to their inheritance, and they rebuilt their cities and dwelt in them. And so they went and returned into their inheritance. The men of Benjamin acted honorably toward the new wives, which they had captured, as some believe they did anyway. They now made themselves busy rebuilding their war-ravaged territory and reestablishing their families. How do we know they acted honorably? I would assume because they went back and they rebuilt these things there in verse 23. Verse 24 and 25 close out the chapter. So the children of Israel departed from there at that time, every man to his tribe and family. They went out from there, every man to his inheritance. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Isn't it sad? That's how the book of Judges ends, with everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That pretty much sums up the book of Judges, doesn't it? Everyone did what was right. They were punished. There was a time of return. Then they went back and doing what they've always done. Now, I know that's a short summary, but that does finish the book of Judges. As I was looking, I saw we actually didn't have, as I'm preparing for this, I saw we didn't have just a whole lot left. And there's really just not a whole lot to discuss other than these individuals taking wives and a very unique way, to say the least. Nothing good's going on here. I mean, punishment happens. I mean, people are killed, basically, it would seem, as some believe here. And then it finishes with them going back and rebuilding. But how sad is it? The last phrase is, everyone did what was right in his own eyes. That's why the book of Judges, as some have said, is not a very beautiful book. It paints a very, very bad picture. Okay, well, that's going to finish our study in the book of Judges. As I said before, when we come back next time, we're going to begin a whole new study looking at strengthening the heart. And it's going to be a series. It'll probably take some time, as there are many topics. And even within the topics I mentioned in our Facebook group, there are several lessons within each of those topics I'm going to choose from and break those down, and we'll study those things together. These Bible studies most likely will not be live, simply because I cannot sit. There's no way I can determine every single week that I'm going to be able to sit down and do a Bible study live at the same time. And we seem to get plenty of people watching and listening to these things when we post them on our YouTube channel and on Byway Media through the Bible Studies of the Russ podcast on that channel as well. If you're not subscribed to this Bible study, go to our YouTube channel, look at Bible Studies of the Russ. You'll see several of our Bible studies there already. They are organized in a playlist by topic. And then, of course, you can go to bywaymedia.org and look up programs. You'll see a link there to our page there for this program as well. So we're going to stop there today. Thank you for studying here with me. Hope to see you again next time as we begin a new series looking at strengthening the heart.